I'm David Neuger. I'm President and CEO of Neuger Communications Group. We're a 30-member person firm based in Northfield, Minnesota, and right here in downtown Minneapolis. We are committed to helping our clients tell authentic stories, and reaching the people most important to them and their cause and what they're trying to accomplish. We are currently entering our 10th year of the Common Good Breakfast Series. And I'd like to actually ask Matt Jennings, which I saw out there somewhere, and Joanne Henry, which is right up here, to stand. I am pointing these two wonderful people out because they are the Common Good Breakfast Series is the brainchild of these two people. And I just want to take a moment to recognize them, that we're 10 years old, and this is what they spawned and did a phenomenal job of laying a foundation for this. So I thank you very much. I don't know if they knew that it would last 10 years when they started this, and I hope they're proud of where it's come from the time when they started it. It's been a great opportunity for Neuger Communications Group to be the presenting sponsor of this. It's been great for our business, it's been great for the community, and it's always wonderful to see the people here. Many of you have been here before. It's great to see your faces again, and for those of you who are new, we hope you come back often. Additionally, we have invited back for our 10th year all previous speakers to the events for the year. And I know some of you are in the audience today. I won't ask you to stand because I'm willing to embarrass Matt and Joanne, but I won't embarrass you. But at any rate, you have contributed mightily to the legacy of the Common Good Breakfast Series. So I'd like a moment to say thank you to our former speakers and presenters for the previous events that we've had. And you may not know this, but all of our speakers present free of charge. And we have some pretty big hitters that come to the table here, and they're all very generous with their time and their insights, and we are delighted they are here. This year is no different. We are, one of the reasons that's important is every year, or every event, we benefit a not-for-profit, a local not-for-profit who can use the funds. So every fund that comes from tickets or from sponsorships goes to that not-for-profit. And today's is Boulder Options. And we'll hear from Daryl Thompson, the president of Boulder Options, in a moment. But before we do that, I'd like to acknowledge our sponsors. So our silver sponsors are Engage Print, an offset and digital printing company down in Northfield, Minnesota, and the law firm of Gray Plant Moody. Our in-kind sponsor is Flight Creative Media. You'll see the gentleman in the back with the video cameras. They are providing the video services for today's event. And our table sponsors are First National Bank of Northfield, right down here, and Northfield Retirement Community. And I didn't see where you guys are. Oh, there you are. Thanks, Tom. So thank you to our sponsors, because that allows us to have the event happen and also gives us more opportunity to give funds to the not-for-profit. And it looks like this event will actually create the largest check we have to give to a not-for-profit, which will tally up all the information afterwards and send a check to Daryl and his crew. So thank you for that. It's a very important part of the process. I'd now like to invite Daryl Thompson to come up and spend a moment or two telling us a little bit about his organization. Before today, I had not had the chance to meet Daryl, so I did not know him personally, but I can tell you I had the good fortune of seeing his work over time. And that includes two careers, really, one on the football field and one with Boulder Options. Both have been sterling. I will tell you, for those of you who don't know, Daryl's a Minnesota native. He went to the University of Minnesota, played for the Golden Gophers, was an outstanding running back there. He then went on to play in the NFL. Please don't ask me for what team. For those of you who aren't chuckling, it's not because I don't know. I do know. And I'd just rather not say. It might be the one blemish on his record is, so, Green Bay Packers. Oh. At any rate, seriously, Daryl is a wonderful person and has done wonderful things, and I have been fortunate to be able to see his career at Boulder Options too through the years, and he has done a phenomenal job there. And he's here in an era where we have a great need for role models, and he is certainly a respected leader in the youth development field. As president of Boulder's Options, he has literally engaged thousands of youth in both Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Rochester area, and I am delighted to introduce you to Daryl Thompson.
So go, Pat, go, right? As soon as I've always been just a Minnesota kid, and then I play for the University of Minnesota. That's easy. And then getting drafted by the Packers, I didn't think it was a big deal really until I got there. And you realize the tradition and history and the hatred between the two states. And my parents are from the South, so it wasn't really the end of the world. I mean, my mom is from Mississippi, my dad's from St. Louis, Missouri, so it was like, oh, you're Packers, that's great, that'll be fun. So it was a great experience, and the NFL was great to me. The University of Minnesota was great to me, and I want to make sure I say thank you to the Common Good for having me here this morning in the Super Bowl host committee, and Dana. We were one of the beneficiaries of the 52 weeks of giving. Made a big difference in our building. We don't get to spend capital on our building to like fix the kitchens and the bathrooms and the windows and the ceilings. That's just like deferred maintenance that gets deferred and deferred and deferred. So we appreciate it. Boulder Options is, we work with kids 10 to 14 years old. That's our sweet spot. We speak to kids and do some other things, but our niche is in the health and wellness and activity and introducing kids to a healthy lifestyle through running, biking, tutoring, homework, yoga, Zumba, barbecue, you name it, an activity, climbing. Most likely Boulder Options is doing that with those young men and young ladies. And we're about 50-50. So we work with kids across the spectrum. So we appreciate the awareness, appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you very much, and I look forward to this morning.
A little shorter, just a little. Good morning, and thanks for getting up in the dark to be with us here in the bright lights this morning. I'm Joanne Henry, and in addition to being a founder of Common Good Breakfast Series, I'm an executive vice president at Neuger Communications Group, and I especially appreciate the willingness of our speakers and panelists to share their insights with you today. And we do in our Common Good Breakfast series choose different topics every time, so I do hope you'll be interested in seeing some of the future ones. But now on to our event today. So we all know as Minnesotans what a big deal the Super Bowl was here, but what about these sporting events, these big national events that we spend a lot of time going after and doing in the Final Four coming right around the corner? What's the short-term impact, but what's the long-term impact for us? Not just economically, but in terms of investments, what does it do for our community? What are pros and cons? And really, what difference is it making here to all of us, to those who participate and to community members who may not? So I think we've got just the right people to talk about these questions and address it. So I'll ask them to come up as I read their names. And again, I'm really looking forward to hearing from them. And we have a great moderator here in Lee Schafer. Lee Schafer is a columnist for the Star Tribune. I know him well, but checking my notes, just because he's won yet another award. So he's been there since 2012 after being a U.S. corporate officer, consultant, and investment banker in his prior career. And recently, Lee was named first place in commentary and opinion by the Society of American Business Editors and Writers in the mid-publication size, and that's beating out Fortune and the Dallas Morning News. So I think pretty good competition there. So thanks, Lee, for giving us your insights today, and we really appreciate it. So next, let's have Andrea Mokros, who's the vice president of the Super Bowl host committee. She's former White House special assistant to the president. Director of Strategic Planning, Deputy Chief of Staff for Senator Amy Klobuchar, and has had a number of other communications positions, but she was point central for all communications for the Super Bowl for these last many months, and they can explain to you that that committee is still going forward and working on final reports and other activities. So thanks, Andrea, for being here today. So Duchesne Drew, if you'd come up next. Duchesne is co-chair of the Final Four Impact Advisory Council, and we did some talking about the Final Four and the impact and the importance of that before he came up and talked about some of his goals, and I'm really excited to hear what kinds of things that the Final Four is doing in terms of inclusion. Duchesne, in his day job, is vice president at the Bush Foundation, and he is former managing editor at the Star Tribune, and also, I believe, was at the Dallas Morning News, if I'm right about that. So thank you to Duchesne. And finally, last but not least, Dana Nelson, who I talked to first because I know of her great works from founding Give Men, a wonderful organization that many of you know about, and Give to the Max Days, which is where Dana was, founding and executive director of that, founding executive director, before she became vice president of legacy and community partnerships for the Super Bowl host committee and overseeing all of the charitable strategy that Daryl mentioned, and really looking forward to hearing her speak to this as well. So let's give them all another hand. Thank you, panelists. We will have time for question and answers from the audience at about 1:45, so we'll let them have at it now. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks, Joanne, for the introduction. And we have 747 landing lights on us. So during the Q&A, we might not be able to see you, but we will do our best during the Q&A. There'll be a mic runner. So I think we just start with the question that framed this whole event. There's a tendency to see these events as discrete events, so people blow into town, spend some money, leave. So Duchesne, maybe you'd like to start us off here. What are the long-term effects? What are the long-term implications for pursuing these kinds of events for our region?
It's a huge opportunity. So if you think about the Super Bowl that just was, beyond the game, right, which mattered and was watched all over the globe, there were a lot of events. They created moments for our community, and there were a lot of below the surface, a lot of other opportunities woven into that. The same is going to be true with the Final Four next year, right? So we're going to have people come to town to watch a couple playoff games and then watch the championship game. And as awesome as that is, and it's at the heart of things, is having a great experience for people coming and focused on the game, there's a lot going on in the background, right? And so there are going to be a whole bunch of companies providing services, making sure that the games go well and that the people who are here to be entertained have a good time. And as you all know, there's going to be a lot of money tied to that and relationships being formed and deepened through those opportunities. And so these events, beyond the moment in time when they land, are huge opportunities to build and really deepen relationships, to create new opportunities for people to get work, to get on the map. And a big piece of it for us is making sure it's done in an inclusive form, right? And so we all know this community is far more diverse than it was 20 years ago. We all know it will be far more diverse 20 years from now than it is today. We have to actively be intentional about working in opportunities for people, to be frank, who aren't often thought of and sort of given those opportunities to compete for business or to, build their brand. So even if you look around the room this morning, it's a great looking crowd, but it's not as diverse as the community outside the doors, right? So our efforts have been very focused on being intentional about making sure that when people show up at events, it looks like, our whole community, not just those of us who are fairly well-heeled. We want those folks there too, right? But that everyone feels meaningfully invited to the party or parties, right? And we want to make sure that whether it's catering or someone writing a contract for insurance or somebody doing design work or providing IT services, what have you, that the mix of people providing those services also looks like our community. And in terms of legacy, our hope is that the people who get opportunities as part of these events, continue to benefit from those relationships that are formed. You work with somebody, they do a great job, you keep them in your contacts list, you refer them to other friends, other businesses that need those kinds of services provided, and begin to expand that pie. Another thing that we're doing on the Final Four is called the Future Stars program, which is an internship program for young people. Part of it's focused on kids as young as high school and extends through college into early professionals. And you think about how you got to where you are today, a good piece of it was probably people mentoring you, a good piece of it was probably people making time to tell you how they got to where they are, to offer you advice. So we're baking in 15 internship opportunities for young people. It's focused on young people of color who are often underrepresented in these kinds of roles, and it's everything from event management to sports management. So we're really trying to think of this as a really holistic approach. What are all the moving pieces? What are all the opportunities? And how do we make sure when it's all said and done, we've made the most of it and we've built the kinds of relationships that help us as a community long beyond when the games are over.
So I want to point out an important part of what he just talked about, which is he didn't really talk about the basketball game. And I'm not really going to talk about the football game because, you know, the NCAA comes to town and puts on a basketball game, the NFL comes to town and puts on a football game. Our job is really to take that platform and turn it into so much more and turn it into an opportunity for the community. And that was really our goal for the Super Bowl host committee, to use that bright international spotlight to take advantage of 5,800 members of the media, which was a record, coming to town to tell a story about who we are and leverage that for the future. So that story that we were seeking to tell was about the Bold North. And for Dana and I and for our team, our success was not when the confetti fell on the field, but about an hour later when we saw Jimmy Fallon come out on the stage with Bold North mittens. We knew that, you know, that was our mark of success, that we had really, you know, succeeded in making Bold North a thing and telling a story about who we are, with the long-term goals of driving visitors to Minnesota, driving business to Minnesota, putting us really on the map in a different way, in a narrative that we were telling. Indianapolis hosted the Super Bowl several years ago, and we really use that as the gold standard of what Super Bowls can be, because they went into it with that same mission of using it as an opportunity to define Indianapolis, to define it as a city that hosts amateur sporting events, that has hosted the NCAA a number of times since. And they saw the results in the years after. They had a 20% increase in meeting and convention bookings in the years immediately after the Super Bowl, because once you've hosted a successful event at that level, you can host anything. And that was part of the story that we were trying to tell, and that we hope will see the benefits for years to come.
So I think the perception a lot of people have is that the Super Bowl is really by and for, you know, the corporate elite. How did this work for everybody else? I mean, could you address that?
I think Dana can tell us our
Yeah.
legacy.
Well, you know, I would love to just applaud Daryl and go back to a comment that he made in his remarks about, the Legacy Fund, we kicked off 52 weeks of giving. So we're Super Bowl 52, and immediately after Super Bowl 51, we kicked off a grant a week for 52 weeks, excuse me, to invest in the health and wellness of kids and families across Minnesota. So we're the Minnesota Super Bowl, investing in the whole state, right, across Minnesota. And Daryl's comment about these were capital grants, money that's really hard for nonprofits generally to fundraise for, to put into projects, again, focused on health and wellness. So the ability to, I mean, I think it's really kind of back to that first question, right, of there was a football game. It was a good game, right? I mean, it was a good game. We watched the game. Could have been better. We're not going to go there, right? I'm still in recovery. It was, we weren't here for the game, right? It was so much more in the game. We joked that it was like, there's a football game, right? And so our work was about so much more than that. So our work really began 4 years ago when the governor called our chairs, Doug Baker, Richard Davis, and Marilyn Carlson Nelson, all really legendary philanthropists, community leaders, incredible stewards who said, we are going to do so much more for our state. I think everything that Duchesne talked about and Andrea talked about. And so that began this process of what does it mean to engage communities? What does it mean to invest in Minnesota? There was a stat that we found around, for the first time ever, kids born today have a shorter life expectancy than their parents. That's not okay, right? And I found that and I brought that to our chairs and they were like, is that in Africa? I'm like, it's in Minnesota. And, home of Mayo Clinic, home of our incredible, innovative medical companies, right? And home of our state, where we pride ourselves on living active lifestyles. So I think we coupled all of that with this incredible platform that we're talking about how do we raise awareness and really make a difference, even though we're going to do this for a year. It's a short amount of time. So all of that is to say, right, this is much bigger than a football game. This is much bigger. This is the kind of impact that we're trying to have by raising awareness around an issue, by making investments, by partnering with incredible community partners to have an impact way beyond February 4th, 2018.
And part of that was extending. We know that the stadium only seats about 66,000 people. I think 67,612 was the attendance at that game. But there's so many more people in Minnesota. So it was, how do we extend the game beyond the stadium? So we went out to the community and raised the funds to put on a 10-day festival, free and open to the public, 48 concerts, a zip line that was so wildly popular, it sold out in minutes. And I think you may see that again someday. Somebody's going to pick that up and do it again. But it was about making this accessible to the community and get them engaged and create memories of a lifetime. I think one of the most fun things for us, and especially for our chair, Marilyn, who chaired the Super Bowl from 1992, was hearing the stories of folks who were part of that, whether they volunteered or attended 26 years ago, and realizing the power that this had to create a lifetime memory for kids, for families, for people who can say, I was part of it.
Has the Final Four committee been as successful in attracting the kind of energy that the Super Bowl committee did? Are we just getting started?
It's still building, right? Because we're a year out, but we've been at it now for almost 2 years already. Okay. So I think that's the really important thing, and they did the same with the Super Bowl. It's a long runway, and the closer you get to the actual events, the more plates have to be spun simultaneously. So we're still, we're about, I think, of the 15 interns, we've hired 7 or 8, so about the midway point on that. We've awarded some contracts. And even with that, as an example, there are some things we don't control in terms of dollars, right? We pay, where we are, actually we're getting free rent, but we have fees that we have to pay. We've got to pay, the cable provider that's at that building. But in areas where we have flexibility with those dollars, we're being very intentional. We're spending, at this point, more than half of the dollars with, businesses that are owned by women, people of color, vets, high concentration in that, focused on businesses run by people of color. So we're trying to use the leverage we have to have an impact. We're going to be looking for volunteers, trying to build out that core in time, but there's not much for them to do just yet. Right. So we've started to beat the drum on that front slowly, and it will pick up and get louder as we get closer to the event.
Okay. So please address this question. The benefits are highest next to the stadium, and as you get further away out into outer parts of Minnesota, it's less of an issue. How did the Super Bowl committee address statewide? What do we want to do statewide, and how did it work?
So a couple ways. One, the direct economic impact of money being spent in local businesses. It really is far beyond just that immediate stadium. The hotels, for example, saw it as far north as St. Cloud down to Rochester. We have 41,000 hotel rooms in this market. By comparison, Houston, who hosted previously, has 95,000. So we really had to stretch out beyond that immediate. In downtown, there's approximately 8,000 hotel rooms in downtown Minneapolis. So we really stretched out far beyond. And of course, I brought my little cheat sheet here to talk about some of the specific. The Twin Cities region's hotels brought in 3 times as much money during this 1 week period, so $73.2 million in that 1 week versus $22.9 million last year. So as Finance and Commerce put it, really a bonanza for the hospitality industry in an otherwise slow time of year. We had to bring in contractors to put on these events. That's everything from caterers to linen vendors to servers, again, during a short, slow time of year. So a tremendous impact. And, much like the Final Four, we had an emphasis through our Business Connect program on hiring women-owned, veteran-owned, minority-owned, LGBT-owned businesses in the community to make sure that those dollars really stayed here. And we're putting together an economic economic impact statement that'll quantify all that in the coming weeks, and I'm really excited to share that. But 52 Weeks of Giving and our travels around the state was really our primary way to make this a statewide event and take the Super Bowl out into the community to International Falls, to Worthington. So I'll turn that over to Dana.
Yeah, so I'm excited. Tomorrow at the Minnesota Council on Foundations conference, we'll share our impact report. And so little sneak peek, 80% of the dollars were invested in Greater Minnesota, and so really the vast majority of those grants and are in Greater Minnesota. And again, to emphasize, each week we were on the road and we were doing a grant announcement event, which was just so much more than, you know, the check and the pose and the cheese, the smiles. It was that, but it was this incredible way to engage kids and families across the state and say, like, the Super Bowl is coming to Alexandria, International Falls, Grand Portage, Upper and Lower Sioux communities, right? So we were really, really, really intentional. We partnered with the Department of Health, and they helped us select. We looked at a heat map. Where are the social disparities, the health disparities, the greatest? Where are we failing our kids, right? And how do we only have 52 grants. It's not a lot, right? But we wanted to make these transformational kind of one-time capital grants, and we wanted that to work the hardest for us. So we had this incredible partnership with the Statewide Health Improvement Partnership, or SHIP, with the Department of Health, and looked for shovel-ready capital projects with these local health boards who think, you know, year-round all the time about preventative health. And so it was a really, really great partnership. And again, back to that sustainability kind of post-Super Bowl. I mean, they're doing this stuff all the time, right? So we don't come in and say, yeah, we're the Super Bowl, like make up a program and make it really flashy and make it for us. We went in, we worked with partners who have been doing this for years. We partnered with the Shakopee, Metawakan Sioux community and their Native Seeds of Health program, nationally renowned, doing incredible things about like reintroduction of indigenous seeds and leading around Native youth health issues, which again, any study will show you just the drastic issues that Native youth are up against. So we ensured that all 11 Native American reservations were part of that portfolio of 52. So again, just that emphasis statewide was incredibly important to us, and those investments have a lifespan of at least 7 to 10 years.
Thank you for that. So the Final Four committee comes to you all and says, okay, what didn't work? What's top of mind? Not everything worked. I mean,
yeah.
I can't. Never in the history of any event has everything worked. So, what would be some lessons learned that you could share with others, other regions or other committees?
We had too many volunteers.
The Minnesota problem.
Yeah, only in Minnesota, right? We've talked. Kate's in the audience. We've talked to her about that. We've been having lots and lots of conversations with Kate. I keep pointing to. So I mean, really, that's kind of a funny Minnesota problem. Funny, not funny, but we planned for attrition. There was none. So again, only in Minnesota, right? Does that happen? But that did actually pose a couple of issues.
Rush orders of uniforms were involved.
Yeah. You know, I think certainly lessons learned. I mean, things that we would do differently. I think around the philanthropy front. I mean, there's always more need than there is money, and I think you know, Kate and Duchesne can share it. You know, when they're ready. I think they've come up with just an incredible strategy around the difference that they're going to make for Final Four. That's different than what we're doing, and very, very smart. So I think, you know, hopefully based on some learnings and conversations. I think it's hard, you know, we're privately funded, and I think it's hard to go out in the market and fundraise for philanthropy around big events, for sponsorship around big events, and I think that the market gets weary. I think that there's a lot of that we see.
You know, I hope if there's one takeaway from this event, it's that people shouldn't be scared of coming downtown during the event. There was all this talk of traffic and what are we going to do, and people need to, you know, work from home. You know, I really think that we can handle all of these things at the same time. We have a vibrant downtown that can juggle multiple balls, and we should encourage there to be multiple things happening at the same time. People can work and host major events, and it's good for everybody. It's good for our businesses. It's good for employees to be able to experience the events, and we really scheduled with that in mind. We started Super Bowl Live every day at 4 p.m. during the week with the hopes that people would go to their job during the day and then come down and celebrate at night. So I think that's something we all need to think about as Final Four comes up and these other major events downtown, is that we can do all of these things at the same time. To use your analogy, the spinning plates.
Well, I found it really heartening. It was a cold week, and people were out in droves, right? So I remember on the front end hoping for unseasonably warm weather, and we could fool all these people thinking it's always 45 in Minnesota in the wintertime, right? And it wasn't. We got a real winter, right? And it was a cold week, and there were a lot of people out.
That Saturday that it snowed was our coldest day and also our busiest day. We estimated 235,000 people out on the streets on that final Saturday before game day.
Interesting. So I know the Super Bowl committee as well as Final Four want to get entrepreneurs from the community who maybe don't have these kinds of opportunities come up often involved. How did the Super Bowl work out for them? Was it a profitable gig? I mean, it's great to get a gig, but then if you lose money on every unit, you know, it's not that much fun.
So again, I would say there's the short game and the long game in this. So the short game was getting business during the Super Bowl, and we're still gathering that data, but there's some great anecdotal stories of business, especially within our Business Connect program. For example, the NFL's Tailgate, which is their big party that they throw pregame every year. It was at the Minneapolis Convention Center this year. 100% of the food and beverage caterers that they brought in were from our Business Connect program. So again, that's money staying in the community and helping grow local businesses. But the long play was to be able to have that as part of your portfolio. Not only the business that you did, but the training that you got, the exposure that you got to the national companies, and to be able to turn around and go back to the convention center or to the Final Four or to future events that come and say, you know, I was part of this, I worked with the NFL, I went through the whole bidding process, so I can do your business in a snap.
Did you guys put out a book too that kind of details, I think, some of the companies you worked with? So
Yes,
that's a resource.
absolutely. So we put out a business directory, just shy of 400 businesses, and again, we hope that folks will use that going forward. So even if they didn't have a need for a caterer during Super Bowl, that reference is there for, oh, now I've got this upcoming event, I've got this handy directory I can turn to.
Okay, so another question, maybe it's the big question that you might hear for all event sponsors and committees. Was this worth it? Was the deal worth it in terms of the investment, the time, philanthropy dollars directed into that? What's the response?
I would say yes. And I think the economic impact report will bear that out. You know, I think even conversations in the community will bear that out. And our research as people were leaving, you know, will you come back to Minnesota? You know, we're showing about 2/3 of folks who hadn't been here previously now saying yes, they would come back. My personal favorite was Dale Earnhardt Jr., who was brought here by NBC Sports to be a commentator. Don't think he'd spent much time here before. Tweeted as they
What was he commenting on? You know?
He's their sports commentator,
Okay,
but
all
they
right.
took him out skijoring, which I have never done. His description of it on Twitter was they strap a dog on you and you hold the duck on. And he said, I'm calling my wife as soon as we're done to plan on my Minnesota vacation.
Yeah.
Like that, that was gold.
That's a really important issue for us as a market, right? So there are, I think, about 90,000 open positions right now today that we're trying to fill, and that number is estimated to grow to more than 110, maybe 115,000 by 2020. And 2020 is not that far out anymore, right? And so we have to actually work, actively work, right, at attracting people to this market. I'm a transplant. I came 25 years ago this summer for a 10-week internship at the Star Tribune, right? I did not plan to stay. You know, all I knew about Minnesota was Prince and Kirby Puckett in 1993, right?
Not bad.
We have to work harder than some other places to build our brand, to help people see themselves here. And the truth of the matter is, whether it's a Super Bowl or a Final Four or any other large event that brings eyes from across the country, if not across the globe, to our town, it's an opportunity for us to build awareness and build, hopefully, you know, positive impressions where people can begin to go, oh, maybe that's not crazy to consider going to that interview in Minneapolis or St. Paul. Maybe it's not crazy to consider going to college at the U of M or St. Thomas. And so we know we're not in LA, right? We're not selling sunshine. There are a lot of great things about living here, but we're still, if we're honest with ourselves, a market that has to work harder than many, many others to attract and keep talent. And these are huge opportunities to kind of update the story that people might have playing in their heads about what this place is and what it can be. And that's also why it's so important for us when we're building these things in to really include the entire community, right? So that people, whether they're getting on a plane and physically coming here and showing up at our events or just flipping on the TV and watching it, that they really see how diverse we are. I've had a number of friends who visited from other markets who were surprised by all the people of color they saw when they're out walking around the streets of Minneapolis, right? Because that's not our reputation. It's our reality, but it's not what people expect to see. We're not going to be able to attract people, especially people of diverse backgrounds, to our market unless they have a sense that we're already here in some numbers. So those things really, they're huge. I mean, we see so many other markets on the big screen when we go to movies or if we're flipping on the news of the day. They don't see that much of us, if we're really honest about it. And so when we have these opportunities, we have to maximize them.
So, yep, just two quick comments. So the report that'll come out tomorrow is probably not a fair answer to this question. It's the 52 grantees that got money because of the Super Bowl. So hopefully they say, yes, by all means, it was worth it, right? So if you ask Daryl, hopefully you say, yes, like we love the Super Bowl. And so, yes, there's that, right? I think the other piece that we don't talk about, and I think potentially it'll be in the economic impact report that will come out in early May that Andrea's working on, is the labor side, right? And so using, using union labor, using prevailing wage, and again, the increase in jobs during January and February at a time that's traditionally low, and so just thinking about that, thinking about the hospitality workers. On a community relations front, we work with the city, and we did outreach in Hmong, Somali, and Spanish, and talked about not only logistics of the Super Bowl, what does it mean for the bus schedules to be changed, the train schedules to be changed, but we said, this is your Super Bowl. This is your Super Bowl. This is your city. You are welcome. We did an interfaith gathering on the Sunday, the opening Sunday, beginning of Super Bowl week, and said, everyone is welcome. It is so important to us to, again, role model this message of welcome, whether it's for someone from Philadelphia, someone from Tokyo, or someone from Cedar Riverside. And that was an incredibly important part of our strategy, that this is everyone's Super Bowl.
Thank you for that. I think now we'll go to questions from the audience. We have a mic runner right there. So please wait till you get mic'd and maybe direct it to one of us. Thank you.
Hi, interesting. I'm curious about the committee's conversations as it was boiling down to potentially having a home team for the first time in the Super Bowl. Were you secretly wishing that not to happen, notwithstanding your allegiance? Or was it viewed as a positive if the Vikings had been there?
It was really an unknown. In 52 years of Super Bowl, it never happened. And, the NFL often joked with us that they had the plan and it was on the shelf, but they'd never really dusted it off. So as we got closer, it was something that we were thinking about. People always ask, oh, well, would have there been fewer hotel rooms? I'm not sure that there would have been. When you think about the excitement, I mean, Vikings country, we're one of only 6 teams in the league that doesn't represent a city. We represent a state, and in fact, because of where we're located, it's really well beyond Minnesota's borders. This country is in North Dakota, South Dakota, even into Iowa and beyond. So it actually could have been an explosion of people in town had we had that hometown game. And sad that we didn't get to test it out, but it was definitely an increasing conversation in our office as that date got closer.
I'm still in therapy.
Other questions? Oh, come on, people. There we go.
So during Super Bowl week, there were reports of price gouging downtown among the restaurants and things like that. I didn't do a lot of research on that, whether those were widespread concerns, but how does that factor into the economic impact for locals who want to be involved and be downtown, but then suddenly can't afford the meal that they normally would buy at a place that that's typically affordable for them.
Sure. So there were a couple reported incidents around town of price gouging. I actually think social media adjusted those pretty quickly as stories got out. I think some of those were self-adjusted by customer reaction. In fact, I think most businesses saw a tremendous influx. There's a couple of bars along Nicollet Mall in particular that told us that they had a 370% increase in business, set their two busiest sales records days ever, and that includes beating summer when at least one of these, Brits Pub, has three patios that are normally full, but yet they bested those sales goals. So I think most of the businesses saw a tremendous amount of influx. And then, of course, many businesses were actually rented out for private parties. There were some 200-something private parties that were happening in town that took over a lot of businesses, not just even in the downtown, but out into, we're aware of some up in the North Loop, uptown. St. Paul had several. And obviously, the Mall of America and the Bloomington area were tremendously busy during that time. Unfortunately, I think there were a couple incidents. I think the market corrected itself on those.
What can we do as a community to help support the Final Four or other events down the road? Obviously, I'm sure money is one of those things, but even beyond the financial donations or support, what can we as a community do?
I think a number of things. I mentioned already, it's already on our website. You can look for opportunities to start signing up to volunteer. We're not really going to aggressively look for volunteers this far out, but that's coming. And so volunteers show up in much the same way the Super Bowl folks needed folks to show up and be welcoming of folks from out of town, and to steer folks, even those of us in town, to the right places. We'll need help with those kinds of things, and encourage people to go. This is not meant to be, neither of these events is meant to be, hey, we rented town out to a bunch of out-of-towners, go hide somewhere. We really want people to come and participate and take full advantage of what this is, and to enjoy it. It's going to be a blast.
I just want to add to that, I was one of the people that took advantage of some of the things that you guys had going on downtown, and I really appreciated the volunteers. I mean, they were around all over the place and friendly, and I'm sure that, I knew where I was going because I'm from here, but I'm sure that the visitors from out of town really found the community welcoming, and I just thought that organizational effort was really well done.
The volunteers really were the star of the show. So if you guys don't already know, we put out a call to get 10,000 volunteers. We had 30,000 people raise their hands. 15,000 came for interviews, and we selected around 12,000 because you always plan for about a 30% attrition rate. And as Dana noted, that didn't happen. So the uniquely Minnesota problem of too many volunteers. But that, as far as problems go, it's a good one to have. And they really were a highlight of the week. It was probably the #1 piece of feedback that we got, that volunteers were so fun and engaging. One of my favorite little highlights of the week was from a KARE 11 reporter who saw 2 volunteers on game day standing out on a street corner, and they weren't helping anybody, so they were having a little dance party by themselves and entertaining themselves, and he got footage of them having a great time, which I think exemplified the spirit that our volunteers brought to this.
And it was 10 below.
Yeah.
They were just like dancing, 10 below, having fun.
One more sort of partial answer to your question as well, which is, this event, the one that these guys have just thrown, we're talking about inclusion, right? So I'd say absent, the invitation to go to the Final Four, every day many of you are making decisions in your businesses about who you spend money with and who you're mentoring and who your network is and how you're trying to grow it. So whether you're involved in one of these initiatives or not, you can be more intentional about those kinds of things. You can be intentional about trying to expand who gets to cater events or perform other services for you that you need at work. And you can certainly be more intentional about the networks that you're building. Just showing up here is a great example of that.
Well, and on that note, before the next question, we have an incredible team of 35 people who all need jobs, including Andrea and me. Let's put that out there. But really, we have incredible junior staff, many young people of color who just came off this really phenomenal experience and would be an asset to anyone's team. So we are happy to share resumes and talk more about our team.
I'm curious about the feedback from the security, law enforcement, FBI, and maybe what lessons may have been learned in that regard for the Final Four.
Sure. So security is obviously one of the top priorities, especially, with a major event like this that draws the attention of the world. So Minneapolis Police Department was our lead planning agency. It was a 3-year process, actually 3+ year process, to make sure that at every single level, local, state, federal, private security, that we were integrated. And, we were really, blessed that we went through 10 days relatively secure, security incident free, kept everybody happy. And in addition, it was a bold undertaking to talk about a Nicollet Mall scenario that was open, no magnetometers, no fence line. And it's really a huge credit to our security community that they were able to execute that event and make it so open and welcoming and accessible to everybody, and still a safe event for everybody who attended.
And we'll certainly benefit from going on the heels of the Super Bowl, and the folks who are responsible for keeping everyone safe. They're already hard at work preparing for that event. They've had a number of meetings already, and there are far more to come.
Dana, for the 52 weeks of giving, how much of the fundraising came from outside of the local community?
It's a great question. I don't have the percentages. I should probably know that. We had, so the NFL provides a seed grant to every Super Bowl host market of $1 million. Our total was 6.2, and we had additional grants that came from outside of Minnesota. I would say probably about 20% was outside of Minnesota, and the rest came from Minnesota corporations and foundations.
Can you give us a little bit of an idea on expectations? So we just came off this great event, 5,800 journalists and businesses around the downtown area expecting 10 days of activity. So with the Final Four, what are the expectations for that?
They're significant. I mean, Super Bowl is Super Bowl. There's really nothing quite like it in terms of scale. So we're not trying to be Super Bowl version 2. But we want to be one of the best, if not the best, Final Four events. And to be frank, our hope is that we do such a great job with it when it comes through next year that we end up on that relatively short list of cities that gets to host with some frequency, right? Beyond the finals, there are all these other playoffs weekends. It's March Madness, right? It's a whole month of activities. We hope that we do such a great job and that it's such a good experience for those of us who live and work here on a daily basis that we're open to doing it again, because that gives that opportunity once again to be on screens across the globe more frequently. And we've built these arenas, right? We've built all these wonderful, whether you were for it or against it when they were being voted up or not voted up, they're here. And they're great amenities, and we need to make the most of them. And we're going to have a lot of people coming to town. We're going to have a lot of people from town going downtown to make the most of it. And so we want them to have a great time. We want people to come away feeling like that, to Lee's question, that it was so worth it. We should do this again, and we should take every opportunity to show off our town. I mean, I think most of you know when your friends come to town who haven't been here before, they leave thinking, wow, there was way more to do. People were nice. It was clean. The food's amazing. It's a really beautiful place. We have all these things that make this a great place to live and work, and yet it's still, in too many places, a bit of a secret.
Yeah. There's one other large event, sporting event. The WNBA is hosting the All-Star Game July 29th, and the Minnesota Lynx are hosting that game. So not sure if that's by design, that it's not super public yet, but there will be activations over the weekend of July 29th as well. So put that on people's radars.
Can you speak to one innovation that you think was particularly good that you'll be passing on to future Super Bowl committees?
Wow, that's a great question. And we've been having active conversations they've now set the next 4 Super Bowls after us: Atlanta, Miami, Tampa, and Los Angeles. So we have been engaging all of them and trying to, impart what our lessons learned to the extent possible. I think certainly our volunteer program set a new standard, as well as our hosting of the media. One thing we didn't talk about here, but we were the first to do this, was something we called Bold North Media Experiences, where we actually organized different outings around town, whether it was, a sled dog experience or curling or a trip to Paisley Park, and actually, organized these for the media and said, here, we know you want to know these things about Minnesota. Minnesota, so we're going to make it easy for you. It's on this day, the bus is going to come get you and take you. And we saw great results out of that. Again, Dale Earnhardt was part of that and saw a number of stories, Sporting News and other places from their Minnesota experiences. And when they share the passion of what they experienced, it really does extend out to other folks. So that would be one thing that I would impart to future host cities. And again, I think our legacy program was, again, a gold standard. The traditional thing to do is to, write a couple big checks, send out a press release 2 days before the game and say, see, look at the great things we did for the community. And we really instead used it as an engagement tool to not only build excitement, but to create a connection point between communities and the Super Bowl. And Dana and I often said our goal was that, kids around the state would be watching on Super Bowl Sunday, at home at their TV, but feel like they were part of this and, have that memory of, this being a special game for them. And I hope that we succeeded in that regard.
Mm-hmm. We had a campaign, a healthy eating campaign called the Super Snack Challenge that Atlanta is looking at doing. So that was it was another really fun piece that was much more wide than the 52 communities. So our goal was to get kids ages 8 to 14 thinking about healthy snacks. And so the irony, Andrew Zimmern launched it at the State Fair, mecca of healthy eating, and it ended at the Super Bowl, another mecca of healthy eating. So and ran between, and we had over 400 recipes submitted and worked with just incredible chefs. That's why I was like, and the food, because we are such a foodie market. And we had incredible chefs, Jamal Hashi, Tommy Beavis, and we're really intentional about the chefs representing the different cultural communities that make their homes in Minnesota, so that the recipes would reflect that, so that the young people would really aspire to participate. And I watched young people try new foods, and I think that was a really important piece of the work. And one young man did not like beets, but he tried them. So check the box. So that's one program that I think will actually live on. We're looking at the Olympics actually as a possibility. That's funded by Newman's Own out of Connecticut. So that was some money that came in from out of state, and I think that will have a long life.
Okay, have we wrapped up with questions? I think it's time to maybe wrap it up. I guess Dave is right there.
Go to work.
Let me turn this way. Oh, Dave, I guess we're done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee. First of all, I told you they'd be awesome, and you were, so thank you very much. Now, speaking of awesome, I'd like us to do one more thing. I'd like to invite Ryan Palmer up here. He's one of the awesome attorneys at Great Plant Moody, a silver sponsor, and I'm throwing him for a little bit of a curve because Ryan's our corporate attorney, and he's usually whispering my ear when I'm supposed to do something. He was supposed to speak before, and I forgot to introduce him. So Ryan, come on up here for a moment.
Well, thanks and good morning. I was going to welcome you to the Common Good Breakfast, but I'm really glad that we were able to be part of this morning. So I'm Ryan Palmer. I'm a shareholder at Great Plant Moody, and it's our pleasure to sponsor this event. We're a law firm that's 151 years old, so we think we know something about legacy. And for us, it's providing great service to our clients and helping them build and protect their own legacies and overcome their challenges and meet their goals. So this conversation hit close to home today, and we appreciate the great conversation and our friends at Neuger Communications Group for producing what we knew would be a great event and really was. So thanks for letting us be a part of it. Hope you enjoyed and have a great morning.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. And once again, thanks to our panel. You really were awesome, so thanks for participating. Have a great morning, everybody.
Thank you.